Under the moon's unyielding gaze, a single drop of blood traced a crimson path through the frost, whispering secrets of sacrifice to the indifferent snow. Ilaria Voss stood at the edge of the central square, her breath forming fragile ghosts in the biting wind that swept down from the jagged peaks of the Iron Fang Mountains. The village of Eldridge huddled beneath a sky heavy with stars, its timbered homes flickering with the orange glow of hearth fires. But out here, in the open heart of the settlement, the cold reigned supreme. Snow dusted the cobblestones like a shroud, and the air carried the metallic tang of impending storm, mingled with the acrid scent of smoke from the pyres that bordered the square, reminders of judgments past. She was no stranger to this chill. As an Omega in a pack that prized strength over subtlety, Ilaria had long learned to wrap her heart in layers of quiet endurance. Her family had cast sidelong glances at her since childhood, whispering of her softness as if it were a curse. Rejections came in small, slicing ways, overlooked in hunts, dismissed in councils, her counsel sought only when desperation clawed at the elders' doors. But tonight, under the waxing moon that hung like a silver sickle, she felt the weight of it all pressing deeper, a prelude to something irrevocable. The crowd gathered thick around the whipping post, their faces etched with the harsh lines of winter-hardened lives. Fur-clad shoulders bumped against one another, murmurs rising like distant howls as the guards dragged the prisoner forward. He was a broken figure, stripped to the waist, his body a map of old scars and fresh bruises under the torchlight. Chains rattled against the frozen ground, and the wind tugged at his matted dark hair, revealing eyes that burned with a defiance the crowd mistook for madness. They called him a slave, a wanderer caught stealing from the granaries. But Ilaria saw something else. A quiet nobility in the set of his jaw, a flicker in those storm-gray eyes that spoke of burdens heavier than iron. The Alpha of Eldridge, a burly wolf named Garrick with a pelt of russet fur in his shifted form, stepped forward on the raised dais. His voice boomed, echoing off the encircling mountains. This thief has defied the pack's law, 30 lashes, to remind all of the price of betrayal. The crowd roared approval, fists pumping the air, but Ilaria felt a tremor in her chest, like the first crack in glacial ice. Betrayal? The man had taken scraps to feed the starving orphans in the outer hovels. She had seen it herself, from the shadows of the alley where she distributed what little she could spare from her own meager rations. The first lash fell, a whip cracking through the night like thunder. Blood sprayed across the snow, staining it a vivid red that gleamed under the moonlight. The prisoner, Kyle, though no one knew his true name, did not cry out. His body jerked, muscles coiling like a predator's, but his gaze remained fixed on the horizon, as if the pain were merely a veil between him and some greater truth. Ilaria clutched the moonstone pendant at her throat. Its cool surface, a talisman passed down from her mother, said to hold the whispers of the goddess. It had been her solace through years of quiet exile within her own home, a symbol of hidden light in the endless gray of her days. Another lash, and the crowd's cheers swelled. Ilaria's heart pounded in rhythm with the strikes, each one a blow to her sense of justice. She had always been the compassionate one, the Omega who bandaged wounds and shared stories by firelight, earning her a reputation as the gentle fool. But gentleness was not weakness. It was the thread that bound the pack's fraying soul. Tonight, it demanded more. As the whip rose for the 5th strike, she pushed through the throng, her woolen cloak billowing like wings in the wind. "Stop!" Her voice cut through the din, soft yet unyielding, carrying the timbre of one who had long practiced speaking to the wind itself. The crowd parted in surprise, eyes turning to the slight figure in the faded blue dress, her pale hair unbound and whipping across her face. Garrick's brow furrowed, his lip curling in disdain. Ilaria Voss, what folly brings you here? She stepped closer to the post, ignoring the guards' hands that twitched toward their weapons. The prisoner's bloodied back was to her now, rivulets tracing paths down his spine, pooling at his feet in the snow. Up close, she could smell the coppery warmth of it, feel the heat radiating from his skin despite the cold. His head turned slightly, those gray eyes meeting hers for the first time, piercing, ancient, as if they held the weight of forgotten thrones. "I offer myself in his place," she said, her words steady, though her pulse thundered like distant drums. Gasps rippled through the assembly. Garrick laughed, a bark that echoed off the stones. "You? An unmated Omega, trading your life for a thief's. The goddess weeps at such stupidity." But Ilaria lifted her chin, the moonstone catching the torchlight in a prism of silver and blue. "Compassion is the pack's true strength. If his crime merits death, let it be mine instead. He has suffered enough for survival. I choose to end it with mercy." The words hung in the air, heavy as the falling snow, and for a moment silence blanketed the square. The wind howled softly, carrying uivos from the tree line, as if the wild itself bore witness. Kale's breath hitched, the only sign of his shock. In all his years as Alpha King, traveling incognito through his fractured realms to gauge the rot within, he had seen fear, ambition, calculated pity, but never this. Pure, unbidden sacrifice from a stranger who owed him nothing. His disguise as a lowly slave had been a test, a way to pierce the veil of flattery that surrounded his crown. Yet here, in this frozen backwater, an Omega gazed at him not with awe or greed, but with a light that pierced his guarded soul. Garrick's face darkened, his claws extending slightly in irritation. "Bind her, then. If she seeks the whip's kiss, let it teach her the cost of interference." The guards moved, rough hands seizing Ilaria's arms, but as they pulled her forward, her eyes locked once more with the prisoners. In that gaze, she saw not gratitude, but a storm brewing, a recognition that this act would unravel fates long woven in shadow. The moon climbed higher, bathing the square in ethereal light, and as the first lash whistled toward her back, Ilaria whispered a prayer to the goddess, feeling the pendant warm against her skin. Little did she know, the chains of exile were just beginning to tighten, binding her to a destiny forged in blood and fire. The whip's shadow fell across Ilaria's back like a predator's claw. But before the leather could bite, a roar shattered the frozen hush of the square. It was not the guttural bellow of Garrick's enforcers, nor the crowd's fevered clamor, but something primal, echoing from the mountains themselves, a command woven into the wind. Kyle, the chained figure at the post, surged against his bonds with a ferocity that snapped the iron links like brittle twigs. His body, slick with blood and sweat, uncoiled in a blur of motion, gray eyes flashing silver under the moon's gaze. The guards staggered back, their whips forgotten, as he lunged not for freedom, but for her. Ilaria's world tilted as rough hands, his, not the guards', yanked her from the grasp of her captors. Pain exploded in her shoulders where the enforcer's claws had grazed her, but it was drowned by the heat of his proximity. The raw scent of pine and iron that clung to his skin like a second hide. He pulled her behind the whipping post, his massive frame shielding her as chaos erupted. Shouts rang out, torches sputtering in the gusts that whipped snow into blinding veils. Garrick's voice thundered orders, but Kale moved like a shadow born of storm, his wounds forgotten in the surge of instinct that bound him to this stranger who had bartered her life for his. They fled into the labyrinth of Eldridge's narrow alleys, the village's wooden walls blurring into a maze of frost-laced timber. Ilaria's breath came in sharp gasps, her boots slipping on the iced paths, but Kale's grip on her wrist was unyielding, guiding her with a sureness that belied his feigned frailty. The moonstone pendant bounced against her chest, its surface now fever-hot, as if the goddess herself stirred within its depths. Fear clawed at her throat, not of the pursuit crashing behind them like a landslide of howls and pounding feet, but of the man at her side. Who was he, this slave, whose touch ignited a pull deep in her core, instinctive and forbidden, like the first tremor of a shift she had never fully embraced. They burst from the village's edge into the wild embrace of the Ironfang foothills, where pines stood sentinel under a canopy of stars. The wind howled mournfully, carrying the distant baying of hounds loosed by Garrick's pack. Kyle slowed only when the tree line swallowed them, his chest heaving as he pressed her against the rough bark of an ancient fir. Blood from his back smeared the snow at their feet, dark blooms against the white, and up close, in the dappled moonlight filtering through the branches, she saw the truth etched in his scars. Not the marks of a common thief, but the deliberate brands of battles long waged, faded runes that whispered of royalty concealed. Why? His voice was gravel and thunder, low enough to blend with the rustling leaves, yet it pierced her like a blade. Those storm-gray eyes bored into hers, searching, demanding. Ilaria swallowed, the cold air burning her lungs, her body trembling from the chill and the adrenaline that sang in her veins. She had acted without thought, driven by the quiet fire of compassion that had always set her apart, marking her as the pack's unspoken outcast. Rejections had piled upon her like winter's drifts, her family's averted eyes, the elders' scorn for her unwolfish mercy. But this, offering her throat to the whip for a stranger? It was exile in motion, a severance she felt in her bones. I couldn't watch it, she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her belly. Curiosity warred with dread. His presence was a storm front, magnetic and menacing, stirring something ancient within her Omega soul. The connection hummed between them, unspoken, a thread of fate pulled taut by the moon above. But she denied it, rationalizing the warmth blooming in her chest as mere survival's illusion. You weren't stealing for greed. I saw you in the shadows, feeding the lost ones. No one else cared. Cale's jaw tightened, a flicker of something raw. Guilt, perhaps, or the weight of a crown he could not yet reveal, crossing his features. He was no slave. He was Cale Thorne, Alpha King of the fractured northern realms, wandering in disguise to unearth the decay gnawing at his lands. Garrick's village was but one festering wound among many, a test of loyalty in a realm torn by rival alphas and whispered betrayals. Yet this Omega, with her unbound hair like spun moonlight and eyes holding the depth of forgotten seas, had upended his quest. Her sacrifice was no calculated ploy. It was purity, a light he had long forsaken in the shadows of his throne. The guilt that haunted him, the blood on his hands from wars waged for unity, the mates he had lost to treachery, stirred anew, making him recoil even as instinct urged him closer. We can't stay, he murmured, glancing back toward the village lights twinkling like dying embers. The pursuit would come, relentless, for the escape of a thief and the defiance of an Omega who dared mercy. But in her, he glimpsed redemption's fragile promise, a balm for the curse that bound him, the inability to trust, forged in the fires of betrayal. He stepped back, breaking the contact, his body language a wall rebuilt in an instant. Go your own way. You've risked enough for a fool like me. Ilaria's hand rose instinctively to the moonstone, its glow faint but insistent, as if urging her forward. Fear whispered retreat, return to the pack's cold embrace, swallow the shame of her folly, but curiosity rooted her. This man, wounded and wild, carried a sorrow that mirrored her own hidden fractures. The wind carried a lone uivo from the peaks, mournful and calling, and in its echo, she felt the first denial crack. This was no chance encounter, but a revelation veiled in night. As footsteps crunched in the distance, drawing nearer through the snow, Kyle's gaze met hers once more, a silent pact forming in the space between. They would run together, if only for the span of this endless winter night, bound by the blood she had spared and the secrets yet to bleed. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The snow-laden pines closed around them like the arms of an ancient guardian, their branches whispering secrets to the wind as Ilaria and Kale pressed deeper into the Ironfang foothills. The moon hung low now, a bloated orb casting elongated shadows that danced across the frozen earth, turning the world into a tapestry of silver and black. Ilaria's lungs burned with each ragged breath, the cold air slicing through her like invisible blades. But she matched Kale's pace, her boots crunching over brittle ice and fallen needles. The moonstone pendant at her throat pulsed with an unnatural warmth, a counterpoint to the chill that seeped into her bones, as if it sensed the unraveling of her carefully woven solitude. Behind them, the pursuit echoed like the growl of an awakening beast. Weavos piercing the night, sharp and relentless, carried on gusts that rattled the treetops. Garrick's pack was no mere hunting party. They were enforcers of a rigid order, wolves who viewed mercy as a weakness to be culled. Ilaria had always navigated their world on the fringes, her compassion a quiet rebellion that invited scorn rather than solidarity. Now, that same impulse had branded her a fugitive, severing the fragile ties to her home in a single, irrevocable act. Exile tasted like ash on her tongue, bitter and final, yet in the stranger's shadowed profile beside her, she glimpsed an unexpected anchor, a shared fracture in the facade of strength. Kale moved with predatory grace despite the blood still trickling from his lacerated back, staining the snow in sporadic crimson trails that the wind hastily buried. He glanced at her sidelong, his gray eyes reflecting the moonlight like polished steel, assessing, protecting. "There's a cave ahead," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that blended with the forest's sighs. "Old Smuggler's Hollow, hidden by the falls. We hole up there till the storm breaks." It was not a question, but a command softened by necessity, and Ilaria nodded, too winded for words. The pull between them tugged insistently now, an instinctive tether that her omega senses recoiled from even as they craved it. He was no ordinary wanderer. His scent, earth and storm, laced with the faint, regal bite of authority, stirred something dormant within her, a curiosity laced with wariness. She rationalized it as alliance born of desperation, nothing more, though the moonstone's heat suggested otherwise. The cave mouth yawned beneath a frozen cascade, icicles like jagged teeth guarding its entrance. Water murmured faintly behind the ice, a hidden vein of life in the winter's grip. Kyle pushed through first, his hand brushing hers in the narrow passage, a fleeting touch that sent sparks racing up her arm, igniting a flush she blamed on the exertion. Inside, the air was still, heavy with the mineral tang of stone and damp earth, a refuge carved by time's patient claws. He gathered fallen branches from the shadowed recesses, his movements efficient, almost ritualistic, and soon a small fire crackled to life at the center, fed by his flint and the dry heartwood he coaxed into flame. Orange light bloomed, pushing back the gloom, casting flickering patterns on the rough walls that evoked the veins of some colossal beast. Ilaria sank against the opposite wall, drawing her knees to her chest, the wool of her cloak damp and clinging. The fire's warmth seeped into her, thawing the numbness, but it could not touch the deeper cold of doubt. Who was this man, really? His body, revealed in the fire's glow, bore scars that told tales of far greater trials than village theft. Deep gashes from claws and blades, a faded brand across his shoulder that resembled the royal sigil of the northern realms, half obscured by fresh welts. She averted her eyes, focusing instead on the moonstone, tracing its smooth facets with trembling fingers. It had been her mother's gift, a relic said to guide the lost, glowing only in moments of true crossroads. Tonight, it burned like an ember, illuminating the cave in subtle blues and silvers when the fire dimmed. Kyle knelt by the flames, tearing strips from his tattered shirt to bind his wounds. Blood smeared his hands, dark and viscous, and he worked methodically, his face a mask of controlled pain. Empathy stirred in Ilaria unbidden. She had seen suffering in the pack's outcasts, the ones she tended in secret, but this was different, raw, regal in its endurance. Rising, she moved to his side, her voice soft against the fire's crackle. "Let me." It was not pity, but an extension of the mercy that had started this flight, a bridge over the chasm of their strangeness. He stiffened, gray eyes narrowing in the firelight, but he did not pull away. As her fingers, gentle, practiced from years of mending the broken, pressed cool cloths to his skin, a tension uncoiled in him, subtle as the thaw of spring. The wounds were deep, but healing swiftly, his alpha blood-knitting flesh with unnatural speed. Up close, she felt the heat radiating from him, a forge's bellows contrasting the cave's chill. "You don't know me," he said quietly, his breath stirring the tendrils of hair at her temple. "Why risk this, your pack? They'll brand you traitor for aiding a thief." Ilaria's touch faltered, the moonstone brushing his shoulder and sending a jolt through them both, a shared vision flickering at the edge of her mind, moonlight on a distant throne, shadowed by betrayal's blade. She shook it off, attributing it to fatigue. "Because I've known exile in all but name," she replied, her voice laced with the weight of unspoken wounds. "My family sees me as the weak link, the Omega who chooses words over fangs. If compassion damns me, then so be it. You fought for the forgotten. That's no crime." Her words hung between them, weaving empathy into something fragile, intimate. For the first time she met his gaze fully, seeing not just the warrior, but the melancholy beneath. The guilt etched in the lines around his eyes, the ethical core that warred with a king's burdens. Cale's hand covered hers briefly, rough calluses against her softness, before he withdrew, the contact breaking like a spell. The bond deepened in that silence, transforming from instinctual pull to a tentative trust, born of shared peril. Outside, the wind howled fiercer, Uivos drawing closer, a common enemy forging their refuge into sanctuary. He added wood to the fire, sparks ascending like prayers to the moon visible through a crack in the stone. "Rest," he urged, his tone protective, laced with a reluctance he could not name. "Dawn will bring choices neither of us wants." As the flame settled into a steady glow, Ilaria leaned back, the moonstone cooling against her skin, its light now a soft echo of the fire. The cave felt less like a tomb and more like a womb, cradling their nascent connection amid the encroaching storm. But in the quiet, doubt lingered. Was this refuge a fleeting illusion, or the first step toward a destiny that demanded everything? The Uivos swelled, a chorus of judgment, and Ilaria wondered if mercy could truly shield them from the blood that fate demanded. The fire's embers pulsed like a dying heart in the cave's shadowed belly, casting elongated fingers of light that clawed at the stone walls. Ilaria lay curled on a bed of pine needles and her sodden cloak, the chill of the night seeping through cracks in the earth despite the lingering warmth. Sleep evaded her, chased away by the relentless Uivos echoing from the foothills, Garrick's pack, circling like vultures, scenting weakness. Her body ached from the flight, muscles protesting the unaccustomed strain. But it was the moonstone's insistent thrum against her chest that kept her vigilant. It had cooled since their arrival, yet now, as the moon crested the cavern's narrow fissure overhead, it reignited, a subtle glow bleeding through her fingers where she clutched it. Cale sat across from her, his back to the flames, silhouetted like a sentinel forged from midnight and iron. He had not slept either. His gray eyes, rimmed with the shadows of unspoken wars, scanned the entrance with a predator's focus. The bindings she had applied to his wounds held firm. The blood crusted over in dark rivulets that traced the contours of his scars, marks of a life etched in betrayal and command. She watched him through half-lidded eyes, the pull between them a living thing now, coiling tighter with each shared breath. Empathy had woven its threads in the refuge's quiet, transforming fear into a fragile alliance, but denial lingered in her veins like frostbite. He was a stranger, a fugitive whose touch stirred instincts she dared not name, rationalized as the haze of peril. A sudden gust rattled the icicles at the cave mouth, sending crystalline shards tinkling to the ground like shattered promises. The wind carried a scent, smoke and steel, mingled with the musk of approaching wolves. Kale tensed, his hand drifting to the makeshift dagger fashioned from a snapped branch and flint, but Ilaria felt it first. A tremor in the earth, not from footsteps, but from within. The moonstone flared, its light erupting in a cascade of silver blue, illuminating the cave like a temple under lunar sacrament. She gasped, sitting bolt upright, the pendant searing her skin, not with pain, but with a clarity that ripped through her mind like dawn-shattering night. Visions cascaded unbidden, threads of fate unfurling before her inner eye, silver paths weaving through bloodied snowfields and throne rooms drowned in shadow. She saw Kale, not as the wounded slave, but enthroned in a grand hall of ice and obsidian, his crown heavy with the weight of fractured realms. Betrayal flickered in the visions, a rival Alpha's blade, poisoned whispers from within his own court, a curse that bound his heart in eternal guilt, rendering him unable to forge true bonds. And then her, an Omega's light piercing the gloom, her compassion the key to unraveling the curse, guiding him to unity or ruin. The moonstone was no mere heirloom. It was the mark of the Pathfinder, a rare gift from the goddess, dormant until destiny called. Rejections of her past, her pack's scorn, her family's exile in spirit, had been trials forging this power, hidden until now. Ilaria, Kale's voice cut through the torrent, rough with concern as he crossed the space between them in 2 strides. His hand gripped her shoulder, grounding her as the visions crested. She met his gaze, and in that instant, the connection ignited fully. An instinctive surge that bared souls. He recoiled slightly, his eyes widening as fragments of her sight bled into his mind. The throne, the betrayal, his own face etched with the melancholy of a king who had lost too much to trust. The guilt that haunted him, the mates slain in political games, the packs torn by his wars for peace, surged like a wound reopened. But beneath it, recognition dawned. She was the one the seers had whispered of in his court's shadowed chambers, the Omega whose mercy could redeem or destroy. You see it, he breathed, his voice a gravel whisper laced with awe and dread. The fire popped, sending sparks spiraling toward the moon's sliver, and outside, the Uivos faltered, as if the wild itself sensed the shift. Ilaria's breath came in shallow waves, the cave's air thick with the scent of scorched pine and her own rising fear. The gift terrified her. It explained the whispers of her childhood, the intuitive pulls she had dismissed as weakness. Now it bound her to him irrevocably, her compassion no longer a solitary flame, but a beacon for his fractured destiny. The curse. It's real. I've carried it since the night of shattered oaths, when my brother's blade turned on me for the crown. No bond holds, trust crumbles to ash. But your light cuts through. She pulled away, the moonstone's glow fading to a soft pulse, leaving her skin tingling with residual power. Tears stung her eyes, hot against the cold, as the weight of revelation settled. Exile had been her shadow, but this? It demanded she step from the fringes into the storm's heart, choosing between her quiet life and a fate woven with blood and fire. I didn't ask for this, she murmured, her voice trembling yet resolute, the wind's howl underscoring her words like a dirge. My pack called me broken, unfit. If this gift means healing your wounds, at the cost of my freedom, how can I bear it? The ethical dilemma clawed at her. Was mercy a crown or a chain? The moonstone warmed again, urging her toward compassion, but doubt whispered of the wars it might unleash. Kyle knelt before her, his presence a wall of heat and storm, gray eyes holding hers with a vulnerability he had long buried. The bond thrummed, no longer denied, but acknowledged in the cave's intimate gloom, empathy blooming into something profound, a redemption's first breath. "You're no broken thing," he said, his hand hovering near hers, not touching, respecting the choice she must make. "The goddess chose you to heal what power alone cannot, but the Pathfinder's gift demands sacrifice. My court awaits, riddled with traitors. Garrick is but a pawn in a greater game. Will you walk it with me or turn from the flame?" The weavos swelled anew, closer now, claws scraping stone beyond the falls. Ilaria clutched the moonstone, its light reflecting in her eyes like stars in a turbulent sea. The revelation hung between them, a crossroads under the moon's watchful eye, where destiny revealed its cruel poetry. Her hidden strength was his salvation, but only if she embraced the pain it promised. As the first shadows of pursuers flickered at the entrance, she felt the fire in her soul ignite, a choice teetering on the edge of war and wholeness. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw the cave's fragile sanctuary shattered like thin ice under the weight of encroaching shadows, the uivos swelling into a cacophony that vibrated through the stone like the earth's own lament. Ilaria rose unsteadily, the moonstone's glow a faint beacon against her chest, its silver light fracturing across Kale's tense form as he positioned himself between her and the entrance. The air thickened with the scent of wet fur and rage, the frozen falls cracking under the assault of claws that scraped away the icy barrier. Garrick's pack had found them, drawn by the moon's betrayal and the scent of blood that trailed like an accusation through the night. The first wolf burst through, a massive brute with russet fur matted by snow, eyes gleaming yellow in the fire's dying embers. Garrick followed, shifting mid-stride into his hulking alpha form, fangs bared in a snarl that echoed off the walls. "Traitor's whore and the thief," he growled, his voice a rumble of thunder laced with venom. "You'll both bleed for this defiance." More wolves poured in, their forms a blur of gray and black against the moonlight slicing through the fissure above. Eldridge's enforcers, faces twisted with the pack's unyielding code, where mercy was the first sin to be torn out. Ilaria's heart hammered, a wild drum in the cage of her ribs, as the visions from the revelation lingered like ghosts. Kale's throne, the betrayals that scarred his reign, and her role as the Pathfinder, the one who could guide him through the labyrinth of deceit. But now, confrontation crashed upon them, dragging the past into the present, like chains forged in forgotten fires. These were her kin, the pack that had exiled her spirit long before this night, family who averted eyes at her compassion, elders who branded her weakness a stain. Garrick, once a distant authority, loomed as the embodiment of their rigid world, his rivalry with greater alphas, a whisper she had overheard in council shadows, pawns in a larger game of thrones. Kale shifted in an instant, his body rippling into the colossal form of a midnight wolf, scars silvered by moonlight across his flank. He lunged, a whirlwind of fangs and fury, slamming into the lead brute with a force that sent snow and stone spraying. Blood arced through the air, warm and coppery, splattering Ilaria's cheek as she backed against the wall, the moonstone flaring in response. The cave became a maelstrom, snarls blending with the crack of bone, the wet rip of flesh, firelight painting visceral strokes of red against the gray. Kale fought not with blind rage, but with the precision of a king haunted by guilt, each strike a measured judgment on the pack's corruption. Yet in his gray eyes, as they met hers amid the chaos, she saw the torment. This was his past colliding, the fractured realms he sought to mend, now tearing at him through these lesser wolves. Garrick circled, his form larger, more brutal, claws gouging furrows in the earth. "You think you're a hero, slave?" he spat, lunging at Kale's exposed side. The blow connected, raking deep, fresh blood blooming dark on midnight fur. Ilaria cried out, the sound raw and involuntary, her omega instincts surging to protect what the bond now claimed as hers. But she was no warrior. Her hands trembled as she clutched a jagged rock, the moonstone's heat urging her forward. The pack's betrayal extended to her now, old wounds reopening, her brother's mocking laughter when she defended the weak, her mother's dying whisper of hidden strength dismissed as folly. This confrontation was her trial too, the pack's judgment on the mercy that had always set her apart. Kyle twisted away from Garrick, his breath heaving in labored bursts, and in a blur shifted back to human form, naked and bloodied, standing defiant amid the fray. "Enough," he commanded, his voice booming with the authority he could no longer disguise, the royal timbre cutting through the snarls like a blade through silk. The wolves faltered, ears pricking, as recognition dawned in their widened eyes. Garrick halted, his shift reversing to reveal a face pale with shock, lips curling in disbelief. Kale Thorne, the Alpha King, here as a beggar? The cave fell into a stunned hush, broken only by the drip of melting ice and the distant wind's mournful sigh. Kale's chest rose and fell, blood tracing rivulets down his torso, pooling at his feet in the snow-dusted floor, a symbolic offering under the moon's gaze. His gray eyes, stormy with the weight of his crown, fixed on Garrick. "I came as one of you, to see the truth of my realms. Your justice is rot, feeding orphans to the whip, while granaries swell for the strong. Betrayal festers here, pawn of greater traitors who whisper against the throne." Ilaria stepped forward, her presence a quiet counterpoint to the violence, the moonstone glowing steadily now, casting ethereal light that made the wolves shrink back. The pack's eyes turned to her, accusatory, disbelieving, the girl they had overlooked, now central to this unraveling. Garrick's gaze narrowed, venom twisting his features. "And you, Voss? The soft-hearted fool, allying with the king? Your mercy dooms us all. The rivals at the borders, Riven's clan, promise power if we deliver his head. Join us or die with him." The choice loomed, a moral precipice carved by blood and moonlight, love or freedom, forgiveness or war. Ilaria's pulse thundered, the bond with Kale a living flame in her core, pulling her toward him, toward redemption's path, where her gift could heal his guilt-ridden soul, unite the realms through compassion's forge. Yet freedom whispered of retreat, slip away into the wilds, reclaim a solitary life unburdened by thrones and curses, her pack's scorn a distant echo. Forgiveness meant sparing Garrick, turning the pack from war's maw with words instead of fangs. But war beckoned if she chose Kale fully, igniting the greater betrayals that shadowed his crown. She met Kale's eyes, seeing the ethical king beneath the warrior, the melancholy man who carried every lost life as a scar, his duty a chain heavier than any disguise. "Strength is not in conquest," she said, her voice steady, poetic in its quiet power, echoing the philosophy that had guided her through rejections. "It's in choosing mercy, even when it costs the world." The words hung, a dilemma spiritual and raw. To forgive the pack's blindness, weaving love's thread through the fray, or unleash war's fury for the freedom of truth. Garrick lunged again, but Ilaria raised the moonstone, its light erupting in a blinding wave that seared the air, visions flashing to the wolves, glimpses of unity lost to betrayal, the goddess's judgment on divided packs. They recoiled, whimpering, the alpha's form trembling as doubt cracked his resolve. Kyle moved to her side, his hand finding hers, the contact a vow unspoken. The cave trembled with the weight of the moment, blood and fire mingling in the snow as Ilaria's choice teetered. Embrace the bond, forgive the past, and step into war's embrace for love's redemption, or shatter it all for the illusion of solitude. Outside, the moon watched impassively, its light a silver promise of rebirth amid the gathering storm, where every wound could become a crown if mercy prevailed. The cave's stone walls trembled as if the mountains themselves recoiled from the unfolding judgment, the moon's silver light fracturing through the shattered falls like shards of a broken vow. Ilaria's hand tightened around Kale's, the moonstone's glow pulsing in rhythm with her racing heart, a luminous thread binding them amid the snarling circle of wolves. Garrick's pack encircled them, forms half-shifted in the flickering remnants of the fire, fangs glinting, eyes burning with the feral hunger of loyalty twisted into betrayal. The air hung heavy with the metallic reek of blood mingling with the damp chill that clawed at Ilaria's skin, each breath a labored pull against the weight of her past crashing down like an avalanche. Garrick's laugh echoed, a guttural bark that shattered the stunned silence, his human form hulking and scarred, russet hair matted with sweat and frost. "The king in rags and his little light-bearer," he sneered, stepping forward, his claws extending like accusations. "You've poisoned my pack with your mercy, Voss. All those years, tending scraps to the weak, whispering against our strength. Now you stand with him? Riven's envoys offered gold and land if we delivered Thorn's head. Power, not this. Delusion." His words sliced through Ilaria, reopening the wounds of her exile, the sidelong glances from her kin, the elders' decrees that branded her compassion as cowardice, the solitary nights by the hearth where she bandaged the forgotten while the pack feasted. This was her past incarnate, the Matilha she had loved in silence, now a cage of fangs demanding her surrender. Kale's grip on her hand was iron, his body a shield of coiled muscle and barely contained storm, blood still seeping from Garrick's earlier strike, tracing warm paths down his chest to pool in the snow at their feet. His gray eyes, shadowed by the guilt that had driven him into disguise, met hers briefly, a silent plea, not for salvation, but for the choice that might redeem them both. The curse clung to him like a second skin, the night of shattered oaths replaying in his mind. His brother's blade, dipped in treachery by rival alphas like Riven, severing not just flesh, but the king's ability to forge unbreakable bonds. Wars had followed, realms fracturing under his melancholic rule, each victory a hollow echo of lives lost. Yet in Ilaria, the Pathfinder's light pierced that veil, her gift a revelation that terrified him as much as it ignited hope. "This ends now," he growled, his voice resonant with royal command, laced with the ethical sorrow of a leader who had spilled too much blood for unity. "Your allegiance to Riven betrays the North. Stand down, Garrick, or face the judgment of the throne." The alpha rival's shadow loomed larger in Ilaria's visions, unbidden flashes from the moonstone pulling at her. Riven's clan, a horde of iron-furred wolves massing at the borders, their whispers fueling Garrick's ambition like poison in the wind. The traitor was no distant specter. He was woven into her pack's fabric. The same elders who had shunned her now pawns in a game of thrones that threatened to engulf the realms in eternal winter. Weavos rose from the pack, a chorus of confusion and rage, some wolves shifting uneasily, their loyalty cracking under the weight of Kale's unveiled truth. One, a young enforcer Ilaria recognized, Torin, her cousin, whose wounds she had once tended in secret, hesitated, his yellow eyes flickering with doubt. Ilaria's chest tightened, the moral precipice yawning beneath her like the cave's abyss. Love or freedom? The bond with Kale thrummed insistently, an instinctive fire that promised redemption, his guilt a mirror to her own hidden fractures. To choose him meant weaving her light into his darkness, guiding the king through betrayal's labyrinth with forgiveness as her weapon, uniting the packs under a banner of compassion, rather than conquest. But freedom whispered of escape, slipping from this chaos into the wilds, reclaiming the solitary mercy that had sustained her through rejections, unbound by crowns or curses, forgiveness or war, to pardon Garrick's pack, turning their snarls to howls of allegiance with the Moonstone's visions, or ignite the fray, letting blood and fire purge the rot, even if it consumed her soul. The wind howled through the breached entrance, carrying flakes of snow that stung like accusations, extinguishing the last embers of the fire. Garrick lunged, his form blurring into wolfish fury, claws aimed at Cale's throat. Ilaria moved without thought, thrusting the Moonstone forward. Its light erupted in a blinding cascade, silver-blue waves crashing over the pack like a tidal force. Visions assaulted them collectively, threads of destiny unfurling, realms sundered by Riven's greed, Garrick's ambition leading to pyres of innocence, and a singular path where Ilaria's mercy crowned Cale, healing the curse through unity born of choice. Wolves yelped, collapsing to their knees, the Alpha's advance halting as the revelations clawed into his mind, exposing the traitor's web that had ensnared him. Torin whined, shifting back, his human eyes wide with shame as he met Ilaria's gaze. Ilaria, we were blind. The elders took Riven's coin, promised strength. But this... He gestured to the bloodied snow, the moon's indifferent watch. Garrick staggered, his snarl fracturing into a guttural plea, the rival's influence crumbling under the spiritual onslaught. Forgive, or kill me, King. But the girl's light, it's the goddess's own. Cale's breath was ragged, his free hand pressing against a fresh gash, the metallic tang of blood sharp in the air. He looked to Ilaria, his melancholic soul laid bare. The ethical king who had wandered in disguise to atone for past sins, now facing the precipice of her decision. "The choice is yours, Pathfinder," he murmured, voice thick with the weight of duty and longing. "War claims them as enemies, scatters the realms further. Forgiveness binds them to us, but at what cost to your heart? Love demands we build from ruins. Freedom lets you walk away unscathed." Tears traced hot paths down Ilaria's cheeks, freezing in the chill, as the pack's eyes, once scornful, now held a fragile plea. The Moonstone cooled against her palm, its light a soft echo, urging the philosophy that had defined her. Strength in mercy, not might. Her past confronted her fully. The Matilha's rejections forging this moment, the traitor within demanding she choose rebirth over retribution. "We forgive," she whispered, her voice a poetic thread weaving through the snarls, resonant and unyielding. "Not for them, but for the North we can heal. Join us or fade into the storm." Garrick bowed his head. The pack's weavos shifting to mournful harmony, allegiance bending like willows in the wind. But as the cave settled into uneasy truce, doubt lingered in Ilaria's core, a spiritual rift. Had she chosen love's chain, or merely delayed war's inevitable howl? Cale's hand squeezed hers, a vow of shared burden. Yet the moon's gaze promised that true judgment lay ahead, where sacrifice would seal their fates in blood and light. The wind carried distant thunder, a prelude to the Renascimento teetering on the horizon, where every forgiven wound might yet bleed anew. The wind's lament softened to a whisper, as dawn's first pallor bled through the cave's fractured ceiling, turning the bloodied snow to a mosaic of rose and silver. Ilaria stood at the threshold of the breached falls, her breath misting in the thawing air, the moonstone pendant heavy against her chest, like a heart unearthed from frost. The pack lingered behind her in uneasy vigil. Garrick's form slumped against the stone, his russet eyes hollowed by the visions that had stripped him bare, while Torin and the others shifted restlessly, their howls silenced into murmurs of reluctant fealty. Forgiveness had woven a fragile truce, but its threads frayed under the weight of what lay beyond. the iron fang peaks rising like jagged accusations, cradling the greater betrayals that pulsed in Kale's shadowed realm. Kale moved to her side, his presence a bastion of heat amid the encroaching chill. The wounds from the fray already knitting under his alpha vigor, though crimson stains lingered on his skin like accusations of his own frailty. His gray eyes, etched with the melancholy of a king who had bartered peace with rivers of blood, held hers in a gaze that bridged the chasm between duty and desire. The curse's remnants clung to him, the inability to forge bonds untainted by suspicion. Born of that fateful night when his brother's blade, swayed by Riven's whispers, had carved not just flesh, but the throne's fragile unity. Wars had followed, realms splintering like ice under a hammer, each victory a pyre for the innocent, fueling the guilt that drove him into disguise. Yet, in Ilaria's light, the Pathfinder's gift, he glimpsed the cure, not conquest, but a union forged in mercy's fire, healing the fractures of his soul and the North itself. Ilaria's fingers traced the moonstone's facets, its glow subdued now, a quiet ember echoing the spiritual rift within her. The choice she had uttered, forgiveness over war, had bound the pack to their cause, turning snarls to steps that would march against Riven's horde. But Renacimento demanded more, a final sacrifice, not of blood alone, but of the self she had armored through years of rejection. Her family's averted gazes, the elders' scorn for her unwolfish heart, the exile that had hollowed her days into echoes, these were the chains she must shatter. Love with Kale was no gentle reward. It was redemption's proof, a path where her compassion became the blade to sever his curse, even if it meant offering her light to the devouring dark. Freedom's whisper had faded in the cave's hush, rationalized away as the coward's veil, leaving only the instinctive pull that now bloomed into acceptance, a tender ache blooming amid the pain like wildflowers piercing permafrost. They emerged into the foothills as the sun crested, painting the snow in golds and blues, the wind carrying the distant thunder of gathering storms. Garrick's pack flanked them, a ragged procession of fur and steel, their allegiance a tentative shield against the rivals massing at the borders. Riven's betrayal unveiled itself in scouts' reports. Envoys who had poisoned Eldridge's granaries with false promises, turning packs against the throne in a web of ambition that threatened to engulf the realms in eternal winter. Kyle led with measured strides, his voice a low command weaving strategy through the pines. But his hand sought Ilaria's in the silences, calloused fingers intertwining with hers, a union unspoken, yet visceral, the bond thrumming like the earth's hidden pulse. As they crested the final ridge, the valley unfolded below, a vast expanse of frozen meadows scarred by recent skirmishes, where Riven's iron-furred legions encamped under banners of black and crimson, their howls a defiant chorus against the moon's wane. Torches flickered like malevolent eyes, and the air thickened with the scent of smoke and blood, the clash inevitable. Ilaria's heart clenched, visions flickering from the moonstone, threads of fate converging. Riven's alpha form, massive and scarred, lunging through the fray. Kyle's crown toppled in pools of red. Her own light, a silver beacon, either illuminating victory or extinguishing in sacrifice. The ethical king at her side paused, his breath ragged, guilt surfacing like old wounds. "This war is mine to end," he murmured, his voice laced with sorrow, the weight of lost mates and sundered packs pressing upon him. "But without you, Pathfinder, its endless shadow, your mercy, it heals what my claws cannot." The battle erupted as they descended, a symphony of snarls and steel under the paling moon. Wolves clashed in visceral fury, fangs tearing fur, blood spraying across the snow in arcs that caught the light like rubies on white silk. Kale shifted into his midnight form, a tempest of power that felled Riven's vanguard, but the rival Alpha broke through, his iron pelt unyielding, claws raking deep gashes that reopened the king's ancient scars. Ilaria fought at the periphery, her gift manifesting in bursts of lunar light that dazed foes, guiding allies through the melee with intuitive paths. Yet each vision drained her, the moonstone searing like a brand, drawing her essence into the fray. Riven cornered Kale against a ring of jagged rocks, his laugh a guttural thunder. Your throne crumbles, brother-in-arms turned foe. The girl's light won't save you from the blood you've spilled. The strike came swift. A poisoned claw aimed at the king's throat, the curse flaring in Kale's veins, doubt freezing his counter, the bond fracturing under betrayal's echo. Ilaria surged forward, the world narrowing to this precipice. Sacrifice her light to seal the union, curing his curse through utter surrender, or withhold it, preserving her soul amid the ruin. Faith warred with despair. Her rejections a forge for this moment. Compassion not as weakness, but as the ultimate strength. She thrust the moonstone skyward, its glow erupting in a cascade of silver fire that enveloped them both. Visions poured forth, not to the pack, but into Kale's soul, the night of shattered oaths rewritten, her mercy a balm erasing the guilt's thorns, binding their fates in unbreakable light. Pain lanced through her, visceral and profound, the pendant cracking under the strain, her body crumpling as essence bled into him, healing the curse in a rush of warmth and light. Kyle roared, the doubt shattering. He twisted, fangs sinking into Riven's throat, the rival's form collapsing in a spray of blood that steamed on the snow. The legions faltered, howls turning to whimpers of surrender as the king's renewed command echoed across the valley. Garrick's pack pressed the advantage, unity blooming from the forgiven fray. Ilaria lay in the crimson drift, her breaths shallow, the moonstone's remnants a cool weight against fading skin. Kyle shifted back, cradling her in arms slick with gore, his gray eyes now clear, unshadowed, brimming with the love he had resisted, now accepted in full. You healed me, he whispered, voice breaking on the edge of tragedy, tenderness forged in her sacrifice. Not the realms alone, but this broken heart. Rise with me, my queen of light. The moon watched from her descent, a silver witness to Renascimento. Ilaria's light dimmed but did not extinguish, her gift transferring in union's embrace, birthing a new era from pain's ashes. The wind carried their mingled scents, blood, fire, and blooming hope, whispering of realms mended, rejections reborn as crowns. In his hold, she felt the pull complete, love's redemption a quiet flame enduring the storm. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.